The American Revolution. The birth of a nation. The year was 1770, and the American colonies were growing restless. For decades, they had lived under British rule, sending their wealth across the Atlantic while having no voice in the government that controlled them. The British Parliament, under King George III, imposed heavy taxes on the colonies, demanding payment to cover the costs of the recent French and Indian War. The colonists had no representation in Parliament, yet they were forced to pay duties on goods such as paper, sugar, and tea. The anger in the streets was growing. Protests erupted in Boston, a city that had become the heart of resistance. Tensions finally exploded on March 5, 1770, when British soldiers, harassed by an angry mob, opened fire on unarmed civilians. 5 men were killed that night in what became known as the Boston Massacre, a moment that ignited the Revolution's first flames. But the colonists were not ready to surrender. In 1773, a bold act of defiance shook the empire. A group of patriots, known as the Sons of Liberty, disguised themselves as Mohawk warriors, crept onto British ships, and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston harbor. The Boston Tea Party was not just a protest. It was a declaration that the American people would not be ruled as subjects. The British government reacted with fury. The intolerable acts were passed, closing the Boston harbor, stripping away colonial rights, and placing Massachusetts under direct British control. The colonies, once divided by distance and culture, began to unite against a common enemy. In 1774, representatives from all 13 colonies gathered for the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. They called for a boycott of British goods and prepared for war. The first shots of the Revolution came on April 19, 1775, in the small towns of Lexington and Concord. The British Army, known as the Redcoats, had marched to seize colonial weapons, but they were met by armed militia. Ordinary farmers, blacksmiths, and shopkeepers. A single gunshot rang out, the shot heard round the world, and the Revolution had begun. The battles that followed were fierce and bloody. The colonial militias, though outnumbered and outgunned, used their knowledge of the land to their advantage. In June 1775, at the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Patriots fought bravely against the Redcoats, proving they could stand against the mighty British Army. Though the Americans lost the battle, their resistance inspired thousands to join the cause. By 1776, the colonies had reached a breaking point. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. The words, "All men are created equal," became the foundation of a new nation, but the war was far from over. The British, enraged by the declaration, sent a massive army to crush the rebellion. The Americans, led by General George Washington, faced impossible odds. In the brutal winter of 1776, his army was on the verge of collapse, cold, starving, and on the brink of defeat. But Washington, refusing to surrender, led a daring attack on Christmas night. In a blizzard of snow and ice, his soldiers crossed the frozen Delaware River, launching a surprise attack on British forces at Trenton. The victory revived hope and proved that the American army was still in the fight. The war raged on. In 1777, the Americans secured a major victory at the Battle of Saratoga, convincing France to join their cause. The French, eager to weaken their British rivals, sent troops, weapons, and ships, tipping the balance of power in favor of the colonies. But war was brutal. Washington's army suffered through the freezing winter at Valley Forge in 1777-78, where thousands of men died from cold, hunger, and disease. Yet, they did not break. Under the training of Baron von Steuben, a Prussian officer, the ragtag militia transformed into a disciplined army. As the years passed, battle after battle wore down the British forces. In 1781, Washington saw his chance for a final, decisive strike. With the help of French General Rochambeau and Admiral de Grasse, American and French forces surrounded the British Army at Yorktown, Virginia. After weeks of bombardment, on October 19, 1781, British General Cornwallis surrendered. The war was over. The United States of America had won its independence. 2 years later, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially recognizing America as a free nation. The Revolution was not just a war. It was a turning point in history, proving that people could rise up against tyranny and forge their own destiny. The cost had been high. Thousands had died, cities had burned, and families had been torn apart. But from the ashes of war, a new nation was born. The ideals of freedom, democracy, and the right to self-governance became the foundation upon which the United States was built. And so, with courage, sacrifice, and determination, a nation was forged in battle, bound by liberty, and destined to change the world forever.